This is a Viva PR podcast.
So I won't name the big brand that did it to us, but they'd taken some of those ideas and used them but not paid for them. I'd come away thinking, I'm not doing that anymore. I look back to 2008, I didn't see any of that coming. Well, I should have done, because I should have been close enough to all of those businesses to know how they were being impacted. As an agency, you feel like you should be the expert all the time doing everything, and that's not always the right thing for the client.
Welcome back to PR in the Real World, the podcast where we go beyond the buzzwords and we lift the lid on what it really takes to make communications work. Today's episode is a real treat. I'm joined by Anne Rimmer, who's earned a reputation as a brand strategist where she shapes brands, grows businesses and cuts through the clutter with an unmistakably northern, no-nonsense approach. Anne's journey took her from her art school days in Blackburn through founding and scaling her own agency, Clock Creative, right through to her current role as a consultant helping companies get to the heart of their brand story. What makes this conversation especially refreshing is that Anne doesn't just talk about strategy on paper, she's lived it. She built an agency where culture was years ahead of its time, introduced flexibility, respect for work-life balance, and had a focus on effectiveness long before they were fashionable buzzwords. And when it comes to brand thinking, Anne's focus has always been clear. It's not just about logos and colours, it's about helping businesses understand who they are, what they stand for, and how to communicate in ways that drives real results. So whether you're an agency leader, an in-house marketeer, or just curious about how to get your culture right, you'll come away from this episode with inspiration and practical takeaways. Shall we crack on? So, Anne, thanks for coming into PR in the Real World. Great to see you again. Tell us about how you got started in the branding world.
Yeah, so I started out by doing, well, it all kind of began for me at Blackburn School of Art and Design. Right. I went to do a general diploma, and one of the things that I did in that was graphic design. That kind of ignited my unknown passion for graphic design, and then I went to Salford and I did a degree in design and advertising. Yeah, it was advertising as well, and I was really lucky there because I've kind of discovered advertising, right, which I now know kind of 30 odd years on that my passion is words as much as that kind of commercial aspect of whatever it is that you're trying to communicate.
But did you start off with that kind of artistic bent?
Yeah. So I went to Blackburn thinking that I probably wanted to do fine art. But you got to try different things. So we did fine art, we did graphics, we did photography, and we did some 3D modelling as well. Yeah. And I enjoyed all of it. So I think graphics, probably what it was is it felt very modern, quite trendy at the time. There's a lot of typography. Yeah. Neville Brody was out at the time and all of that stuff. So that really kind of ignited something in me, I think.
Interesting. So you got to Salford and a spark was lit.
Yeah, in many ways, because I was brought up in the Ribble Valley and I'd not been to a big city. You know, Manchester and Salford. Manchester was just an amazing place to be. So that was where I always kind of look really fondly back at that time, because I feel like I went from being probably a bit of a farmer's daughter, although my dad was a solicitor, but we had a small holding and his kind of dream would have been to have been a farmer, I think. And I loved the outdoors and still do. But to go off into Manchester in the 80s and kind of experience that, really kind of, I suppose that's where I started to learn about myself. Yeah. And I was very lucky because the course was being led by a guy called Jeff Shaw. And Jeff is quite different, I think, as a lecturer, in that his premise was you're entering a very commercial industry in graphics. So whereas I had friends who were studying at Manchester Met at the time, and they were doing a lot of theory, Jeff was very much about the commercial aspect of an agency.
Right.
So
was that his background?
Yeah, I think it was. And also he was still working, so he still had private clients,
Right.
which he would bring in, and we would see live briefs that he was working on. And we'd have to present to some of his clients sometimes. And he had this regime that I hated, which was every Monday morning, 9 o'clock, we had to present whatever brief we'd been working on, our thinking. And what he really did to us was, whereas I very often you'd kind of stand and you'd start talking about the fonts you'd chosen, the colours, he'd really get you to think about, he'd challenge you on, well, why that font, why those colours?
Yeah.
What is it that you're trying to communicate? And kind of did a lot of work to help us understand how to get under the skin of a brief, but probably even more importantly, under the skin of a client.
Right.
So my first year was quite torturous because I thought I was there to make things look pretty. And I was quite good at that.
Yeah.
But actually, that wasn't what he wanted from me at all.
Yeah.
And it took me probably the whole first year to realise that.
For the penny to drop around the link between creativity and that business aspect.
The real kind of business end of it all the time. And I think also we were in an era where people got thrown off courses.
Really?
So our first year, he kicked 6 off. One of them because he just never turned up.
Yeah.
But the others, he just said you weren't going to make it, you know.
Doing
So
you a
it's
favour.
quite scary. I mean, that just wouldn't happen today, would it, really? No. But I'm very grateful when I look back at that time.
Yeah.
Because I think what that really taught me, and I have it, you know, to this day, is it's not about what you're going to deliver. It's about understanding what is the real problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And very often a client is asking you to do something, but it's not that thing that needs fixing, it's something else.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a familiar refrain in this room that we need a mouse mat and a poster. So how important was learning through doing, like those real client briefs that you got?
Yeah, I didn't realise at the time how important that was, but I think it's really valuable. When you're giving somebody who's quite inexperienced a written brief, what you really need them to do is to think outside of that brief, don't you? You've got to go and do a bit of research as well. And actually, because I knew that he was going to put me in front of a client, I thought, well, I better go and learn about their business. Yeah. And I better go and learn about who it is we're communicating to. So that grounding really was invaluable. But also the other thing he encouraged us to do was to go and get work placements. So over the summer, I would go off to what was Royds McCann at the time and get a couple of months' experience there. And what we were being taught in the classroom was exactly what was happening at McCann's.
Right.
So I felt very comfortable there. I felt that I understood when I was being given a brief the kind of questions I should ask around that brief to really get under the skin of it, and the research and insights I needed beyond what I had in that brief.
Yeah.
And I think that was the reason why I ended up coming out of uni and getting a job.
So tell us about those early experiences in the job world.
Yeah, so do you know what? When I think about it, a lot of it was I was very comfortable on the creative side, you know, taking a brief, producing some concepts, presenting that back to what was generally the account managers, and never really got in front of a client there. But actually, I think the big things that I learned early on were about culture and about the politics.
Yeah.
And it's the nuances, isn't it, of you've got to adapt according to the client that you're going to speak to. And, you know, as a junior or as a student, the client for me was going to be the account manager.
Yeah.
And I had different account managers and different briefs and different styles. So it was the soft skills, I think, that were the most important thing that I learned there.
So how long was it before you ended up setting up your own agency? Were you...
Quite a few years. So I started Clock Creative in 1999.
What was the spark then to setting up Clock?
Frustration. Yeah, it's classic, really. So I'd stayed in Manchester, kind of considered going off to London. At the time, everybody was like, you know, all the best jobs are in London, all the best agencies in London. And to be fair, the big agencies were there in the main. But I wasn't necessarily drawn to the big agencies. I went off and had interviews with Pentagram and all the ones that I'd kind of really admired. But London just didn't feel like it was for me.
Yeah.
And I loved Manchester, so I chose to stay there. And yeah, I think really it was just about finding my feet within the industry, because I naturally went into advertising. So my first kind of early years were in advertising. But then I stumbled upon branding from one of the agencies, Hemisphere, that I worked with, and loved it. I just loved that from the moment I began working in it, because that's where you really get under the skin of a business.
Yeah.
And you get into what makes that business tick. So that was where I kind of stayed, really. But starting Clark, to answer your question, I think the frustrations were, I could see two things in the industry. One was so it was the era of retainers.
Yeah.
And I felt like we weren't being taken seriously enough. We weren't taking ourselves seriously enough. I felt that creative design thinking, problem solving, could really add value in the boardroom. But perhaps it was just my experience, but I was seeing in agencies that we were very much the doers.
Yeah.
And I felt we should be the thinkers.
Yeah.
And then the other frustration I had was culture in agencies, of working very long hours, pitching all the time. You know, it wasn't unusual for me to be in the agency at 9 o'clock at night and then back in at 7 in the morning, and weekends as well. So I just, those two things, I felt there was a better way or a different way.
Yeah.
And that was why I started Clark, yeah.
Quite a leap, though.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? You just have I must have just had a self-belief that I could do it differently. I don't know.
So tell us about how you got Clock off the ground and what gap you filled in the market.
Yeah, so the previous agency that I'd worked at, I'd been quite fortunate in that the guy that owned it really gave me a lot of autonomy. So I'd taken on a creative director role there. So I started as a senior designer, I'd worked my way and then been made creative director. But actually ended up doing a lot of new business, a lot of the financial reporting. So I got really close to how the inner workings of the agency and how to make it profitable, because it had been working at a loss for quite a few years. And so built that up. I think we got turnover to about 750,000 and, you know, good profits. Yeah. So I'd learned about account management, I'd learned new business, I'd learned the commercial aspect and managing people. So really what I felt that I could do was go out and win work. But I really wanted to focus on, I suppose, I didn't know at the time, but more strategic work. I wanted to look at the problems that businesses were challenged with, that traditional marketing would look at, but then come at that from a branding point of view. In other words, look at how that business could communicate more powerfully, differently, how it positioned itself in a market. So I just used my contacts to help us win those first couple of clients.
It's interesting when you talk about brand, because it's one of those very simple words that has lots of different associations with, and you sit with different people in the industry and you'll get a different explanation each time. So for you, what are we talking about when we're talking brand? Yeah,
so brand for me is, I see it as the DNA of a business, because I think branding is who that business really is, what it does and how it does it. And I've tended to stick to B2B as well. Yeah. So I've been really drawn to B2B because my early career I did quite a bit in consumer. But when I started getting into B2B, I recognised that you've got this bigger challenge because you've got so many more decision makers and you've got seemingly often quite mundane, boring industrial, often, products to sell. But the real truth about it, and this is where the branding comes in, is their customers aren't just buying that product, they're buying the business.
Yeah.
So that's where the branding comes in, because what we're trying to do is help a customer who doesn't know you yet trust you.
Right.
And trust in B2B is everything. So I think that's branding's role. I think that's what it does if it's done right. It's saying, this is who we are, what we do, but this is how we do it and why we do it that way and what we're built on, what we're about as a business.
So you go way beyond the visuals into the message, and that's the cornerstone for you.
Yeah. So the work that I do today as a consultant is really about defining how that business sits in a marketplace, looking at the competitive landscape and saying, this is why we're different, this is why you should buy from us. So it is very much about the communication.
And telling a story.
Yeah, definitely storytelling. And I think that's really come into its own in more recent years, the storytelling side of it.
I guess it's a route round when you're talking about highly technical or complex fields and sectors that you'll be working in the B2B space.
Yeah.
Storytelling is a way to cut through and engage with people.
Definitely. I mean, you'll know that as probably even better than I do. But yeah, clients get really excited about this because sometimes you're working with a company who's superb at what they do. And I tend to find a lot of the companies I've worked with over the years, they are succeeding because they're really good at selling. But they've reached a point where they're finding themselves either competing with competitors that they know aren't as good as them, or they've become a bit of a me too in the way that they present themselves.
Yeah.
So when you can kind of cut through all that for them and just give them a really simple view of their own business that helps them understand from a customer's point of view why they're different, then they get really excited by that because they've struggled with it for so long. Because I think when you're inside a business, and I found this with my own business, you can't see the wood for the trees, can you?
No.
You're so self-critical, you can't see what it is that you're doing that's adding value.
Yeah, and you're drawn to focus on deliverables, aren't you? And trying to get the latest thing out the door, whatever that might be.
Exactly that. Yeah.
And you forget what problem you're solving for people.
Yeah.
Tell us about Ramsbottom, because Clock, did it start off in Ramsbottom?
We started in Bolton, and I started in Bolton because I was living in Rawtenstall at the time. And ended up starting in Bolton because Bolton at the time was a thriving town, sadly not today, and there was a lot of support available for start-up businesses. So just started in an old mill, had a kind of workspace in there. Loved it, actually. Absolutely loved the kind of culture of Bolton, get things done kind of place, and really supportive. So I was a bit loath to leave Bolton. But what happened was I wanted, we'd been renting a lovely place in the centre of Bolton, and I'd tried to buy that from the landlord, but in the end he decided he didn't want to sell it.
Right.
So I kind of got the bug for buying our own place, and found the old Working Men's Club in Ramsbottom, and it was perfect, really.
Yeah.
And I do love Ramsbottom, so we ended up buying that and moving over there. That, I think, was about 2005, and we sponsored Ramsbottom United. Yeah, because like you guys, I just really believe in being part of the community, and I thought we need to kind of say we've arrived here and that we absolutely wholeheartedly throw ourselves into Ramsbottom. So that was real fun. We really enjoyed that. We had a good few years sponsoring them.
How did that work out, though? Because for listeners who aren't familiar with Ramsbottom, it's a small mill town, 15, 20 miles north of Manchester city centre. How do you attract the clients? How do you attract the employees to that? Were you not making things far more difficult for yourself than you could have done?
It's interesting, isn't it, that? Because I did worry about that. We had the similar challenge, I guess, in Bolton.
Yeah.
So in terms of the clients, I don't think that was ever a problem. I think sometimes it was a problem in our heads. So if we were going into present to a large client and we knew there were other agencies from London and Manchester, then we tended to think, oh, we're from Ramsbottom, we're the underdogs. But we kind of proved ourselves wrong over the years quite a few times. But I think in terms of employing people, I put a lot of effort into that because I knew it was a big ask to get people to come to Ramsbottom.
Yeah.
There's, the public transport is fairly non-existent.
Yeah.
So you're asking somebody to commute. But actually what we found over the years is that we were attracting people who had had enough of the commute into Manchester in the main.
Yeah.
So we had staff who were local. We had people who were coming from Lancashire, from South Manchester. We had one guy who came from Warrington. And they all said the same thing, that they were going in the opposite direction of all the traffic going into Manchester.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked in our favour. But I did whilst we were in Bolton, actually, in 2001, I introduced, I guess it was flexible working, but duvet mornings.
Right.
And
you were way ahead of your time then.
Well, it turns out we were. I think people thought we were a bit mad at the time. And I know some agencies were a bit annoyed at us as well, because really what the message I was putting out was, come and work here, where we're building a culture that is standard 9 to 5. You're not expected to work extra hours.
Yeah.
And it's flexible. So we had people working condensed weeks. We had some people part-time.
So condensed weeks, this idea of a 4-day working week, was something that you were doing 20 years ago?
Yes, yeah.
It's all new and all the rage now?
Yeah, and it worked. It helped us. I don't think it necessarily helped us attract people, but certainly keep good people.
Yeah.
So a lot of the team were quite young, and as they became young parents, that flexibility was invaluable. And I remember when we were in Bolton, actually, was a brilliant designer I had, a senior designer, and her mum had cancer, and she wanted to spend as much time with her mum as she could, so she worked from home quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it worked. As long as we got what we needed done, then everybody's happy, aren't they?
Yeah. It's not about, and we've found that, haven't we, in the way the world's changed over the last few years, that it's not about where the work's done.
No, I found that ironic when kind of COVID hit and everybody was whittering on about this new thing of working from home, and you just thought, wow, we've been doing this for years, what's the matter?
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the progression at Clock and how things grew and the success you had there.
Yeah, so really, I kind of look at it now and I think, well, so I had read that the first 5 years of a business are the toughest and that most don't make it.
Yeah.
So I kind of lived on fear for the first 5 years. But actually, when you think about it, the only way is up. You're starting with zero.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic run. Yeah. In fact, the first 10 years were. And we started out trying to do this kind of strategic work, but in reality, we probably got about 20% of that because a lot of businesses didn't understand brand strategy at all. And it took me quite a long time to realise that the trick was not to talk about that and call it something else.
Ah, right.
So we were doing lots of things. We were doing packaging design. For a long time, we got involved in a lot of own label work, both consumer and B2B later. And then we had some really lovely clients who stuck with us for many, many, many years that enabled me to build the business.
Yeah.
There were 3 of those. And then 2008, we had 3 big clients that pulled back. So we hit that recession.
Yeah.
We had a big American client was the first one to say, we're just going to rein in the marketing spend. Then we had a big contract with Lex Autolease at the time, and they'd got acquired and brought marketing teams together, and our team was the one that kind of went.
Yeah.
And then we had a 3rd client, not as big as those 2, but still a good, solid client for us.
But when you get that 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
it feels like the entire world's against you, I guess.
Wow, what's going on here? But actually, it was the best thing that happened to us because 2 things happened really. One, I looked at the team, thought, I don't want to lose anybody in this team. We're going to build this back up, and I need them all. So luckily, I'd built up profits in the business. So my kind of, I suppose my character is I'm a saver, not a spender. I kind of always save for a rainy day, and that's what I'd done. So I learned that was the right thing to do, not to borrow money and to save, which is what mum and dad had taught me. But the other bit was when I looked at those 3 clients, they were 70% of our turnover.
Right.
And I thought, never doing that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was good, really. And it gave me the opportunity for the next 2 years to kind of get our house in order.
Right.
And that's when I decided we were going to really kind of niche. So we really were going to go head on into B2B and branding.
What was the difficulty then doing the branding side? I know I laughed earlier about the different definitions, and we get sent brand guidelines by teams, and that's all around the kind of where you put your logo and what size and what background and so on. Typically, what's the confusion that you're trying to unpick there?
I don't think it's as bad now, but for many, many years, really, if you were talking to a company about branding, if they didn't glaze over, the next thing they'd be doing is thinking, well, how is that going to give me lead generation?
Yeah.
What's the point in investing in that? We've got a logo, we've got our colours, I'm not bothered about that.
Yeah.
So it was really about, they didn't understand when you were talking about brand strategy, putting those 2 things together, what that was.
Yeah.
And so we really had to look hard at our language and what we were saying. So we had to talk about things like lead generation, and we had to talk about competitive advantage, those kinds of things. But actually we knew what we meant, that if they didn't clearly communicate the added value they were bringing to a market, then they were losing out.
Yeah.
And actually, the proof was in the pudding, so we had to deliver on that.
Yeah.
So in the background, we were doing a lot of work to understand who they were and the culture and the audience and how they added that value and help them communicate that. But actually, the reality was, whether it was their in-house team or whether they were working with other agencies on, maybe digital marketing as well, things like that, the impact worked.
I'm going to say, how did you measure impact?
So we did measure it on those tangibles. So the things that they wanted to see, so their inquiries they wanted to see, they wanted to see conversions, and they wanted to see, in some cases, they wanted to measure what the perception was of the business, how they were understood and how they were perceived. So by measuring all of those things, and I mean, we joined the Design Business Association very early on. So I'm going to say, again, it was probably 2001. And I ended up chairing it in the Northwest because everything was very London-based.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring it into Manchester. So they're all about effectiveness, design effectiveness. So I used a lot of what they were teaching to help me establish our processes internally.
Yeah.
So that we were measuring effectiveness for the client. And that's what we talked about. And we were able to prove to them what our work delivered.
That's interesting, though, isn't it? Because that approach will have been fundamentally different back 20 years ago.
It was, yeah, and it was hard, you know, and it's still hard, isn't it? Getting any kind of measurement, really robust measurement criteria is hard.
But post 2008, when you had that 1, 2, 3, and you know, those dark days, how did you rebuild? What happened next?
So we rebuilt by really focusing on the strategy end of it, so effectiveness, essentially. We put in place, started to build kind of senior team, so I'd had a very flat structure to that point, and I'd recognised a little too late, I think, that I was often a blocker.
Yeah.
Too much was spinning around me, and I was holding it back.
Yeah, because you were that one person that needed to make every single decision.
Yeah, so I was kind of doing that, going out, winning the business, doing the account management, all the stuff, you know, that you often do in a small agency. So, started to put some structure in place and to let go of some things. And I think the other thing that we did was really pull away from free pitching, because we'd been doing some free pitching in our desperation.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the measurement of that and the time we were putting into it, and we'd had a couple of instances, I won't name the big brand that did it to us, but that was the breaker, where they'd taken some of those ideas and used them but not paid for them. And I just thought, why am I doing this?
That's, I mean, so soul destroying.
Completely. And for the team especially.
Yeah.
Because you're doing your day job, you've got to keep up with the client work you've got, but then you're being unfair to those clients because you're also having to do the additional free work for these clients that want these free ideas.
Yeah.
So, and again, being a member of the DBA really helped with that, because they're completely anti-free pitching.
Yeah.
I'd been to a few events by a guy called Blair Enns, who wrote a book called Win Without Pitching. He's brilliant. I still love him today. And I'd come away from one of those in London thinking, yeah, that's it. I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And so we didn't. And
quite a brave step, though.
Yeah, it felt scary at the time, but actually it worked out to be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because again, what it did was it forced me, who was doing the new business, to be better at filtering any inquiries.
Yeah.
And the better we got at that, the more confident we got that we were matching ourselves with the right clients.
Yeah.
And those clients turned out to be just superb clients who had trust in us. We worked together so well. And then, of course, we delivered our most effective work in doing that.
Yeah.
So everybody won from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. So you went from that plateau into or backward step in 2008 to a different beast. Yeah. What happened next?
So really what happened then was I went and did Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses programme, which was brilliant. I mean, they call it a kind of mini MBA. I think naively I was looking for something, because when you're leading a business, and I'd been leading it for probably 12 years by then, I never felt good enough.
That's an interesting thing.
And as we got bigger and I got better people in, I felt less like I was able to lead the business. So I was looking for something. And somebody had recommended I look at this, and it's really hard to get onto, and you're going to go for interviews and all the rest of it. And I got on it and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do that and run the business? But I did, and I got a lot out of that, because I was suddenly, you kind of thrust into a place where you're put into groups and you think you've got nothing in common. You know, there was like a £10 million manufacturing company, and there was a £30 million international business, and it goes like that. And you kind of sat there thinking, what the heck am I doing here? But as soon as somebody starts talking about a challenge, you realise you've all got the same challenges. You're just in different sectors and you're at different stages.
I know somebody who's been through that program, and they talked about the 90-day sprints and so on. The cohort that they were on is still in contact with 10 years later,
Yes.
and that group mentality that was
Yeah.
forged for him.
It's the best thing
sounds
ever.
similar that you're probably still in contact with some of those people.
All of them, and many more besides, because once you kind of in the alumni, as they call it, they bring you together a few times a year, and so you're just constantly expanding that network. And I've met some fantastic people through the Goldman programme. So I did that. Now that programme is all about growth.
Yeah.
And I came away thinking that was the next stage for us, that was to really go for that growth. And so I'd met somebody on that course who was also running an agency, B2B, in Manchester, but they were very different to us. So we had a kind of small, say, 10, 12 client base, but we'd work with them year on year on year, and it was quite strategic work. They had sort of 30, 40 clients, but it was very tactical work.
Yeah.
And they were looking to do some strategic, and we saw an opportunity for our clients to be able to have the tactical delivery there.
So it seemed a great marriage.
Yeah, so that seemed like a really good fit. And I was going through this crisis of, I'm not good enough to lead this business, and if I'm going to grow it from £1 million to 2 million or whatever, I can't do that. That's not me.
Yeah.
And so Michael and I had these discussions, and we reviewed the businesses and looked at plans, and we ended up merging the two businesses. And Clark moved into their offices in Media City. And so we created this new agency, which was our first mistake. So we got rid of, we had Clock Creative, which I now know had a lot of brand equity.
Wouldn't you have known?
Honestly. And we had Marketecture, it'd been around almost as long as we had.
Yeah.
And we threw both of those out and we created Up B2B. So you've got this new agency that's suddenly £2 million that nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah.
He thought that was a good idea. So we really kind of worked hard at building that. And for me, it's really interesting because when I was looking at that merger, the things that concerned me the most were, does this deliver anything for our clients? Is there any value for our clients in doing this?
Yeah.
And I had to satisfy myself with that. And the second piece was the team. What does this bring for them? Is this the right move for the people? And actually, it ticked boxes for both of those, but I'd forgotten myself in all of this.
Right.
So we kind of merged this agency, and it was mad. The first couple of years were just mad because you'd suddenly go from, I think we were 12 people, and we went to 18. No, sorry, I'm talking about it was 28 people. It was double, yeah. So nearly 30 people. So it needs managing in a different way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there were now 3 directors, 3 shareholders in effect, and we kind of thought we'd figured it out, who was going to be MD and who was going to do this, that and the other. And I very much like being in with clients and delivering the work, so I'd continued leading the brand strategy side of it. But the reality for me was very different to what I thought, and I realised a little too late that it wasn't going to fulfil me.
No.
The team were happy in the context of lots of clients, lots of great work, lovely premises. They're suddenly in Manchester, in Media City, which is a great place to be, although the commute wasn't great.
Yeah.
And they had career progression and a bigger team. And clients were happy too, because the work continued to be delivered, in the standard that we'd always delivered, but they could also get other services. But for me, it had really lost its heart and soul.
Yeah.
And I think, you can't underestimate that. You know, I'm not driven and motivated by size and scale or logos, you know, which clients we're working with, or money. It was none of that for me. It was all about the effectiveness of what we were delivering and were we shaping something that was different. And I think it started to feel like when you're running a big agency, you are running it. You spend a lot of your time running it and figuring that out. It's a lot of process. There's a lot of financial management to deal with. And obviously sales had to be a lot more structured. And I think we did struggle to get the two cultures together. They were very different.
Yeah, and that again, looking from this distance, hindsight being a wonderful...
Yes.
You can see how that could happen.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I guess it didn't do much for your imposter syndrome as well, being thrown into that new, you know, you might not have felt capable in the old Ramsbottom clock world, but being then suddenly thrown into this new vision.
Yeah. And I think what was really interesting for me was I felt like I wanted to get hold of it and do something with it.
Yes.
But it wasn't in my gift to do that.
Yeah.
So I realised that I'm a shaper.
You'd foregone some control then as well?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, from a shareholding point of view, I had the most shares, but it didn't mean anything because, you know, when you work in a partnership like that, it's not about who's got the most shares, is it? It's you've all got to work together and do what's right for everybody. So I was very much stepping back because I wasn't the MD, and you know, just trying to support the MD in his choices. Yeah. But really, I wanted to do things very differently.
Yeah.
And I found that really frustrating.
So how long did this marriage last?
So we're about 5 years in before I decided that life was too short and I needed to just go and do something else instead.
Right.
Yeah. So
what was the something else?
So I hadn't really figured it out, but I knew that I wanted to work directly with clients. Yeah. So I just agreed to sell my shares to the other directors and to leave the business, and that's running today, and you know, everybody's cracking on as normal. But what I did is I kind of stepped back, and I was actually really lucky because a manufacturing client I've been working with for a few years by then, we'd gone through a rebrand process with them. It asked me if I would write a book for them to give to their customers.
Right.
And I thought, what a great project to throw myself into and just do that and then figure it out afterwards what I'm doing from there. So that's what I did. I spent the best part of about 12 months researching for this book, which involved interviewing a lot of their customers from all over the world. And what I was trying to do was uncover the kind of secret to success for these small pet businesses.
Right.
So I loved the whole process because essentially it ended up being like a brand process for me.
Yeah.
And actually the results were really enlightening. It wasn't what any of us expected it to be. And we kind of discovered these, what I ended up calling the 6 key ingredients for success. And they're very much around values and principles and very aligned with branding. So, yeah, that was a really great first job for me, first experience, yeah.
And what is life like now as a consultant, and how does it compare to that kind of agency life that you once had?
It's very different. I think, I absolutely love what I do now because I work directly with clients. I get to work with their in-house teams, their agencies. Sometimes I bring freelance partners in or agency partners. And it's really great because you've got to keep your perspective like you do as an agency. You know, as an agency, I think I always used to say to my team, one of the most important things we bring to a client is perspective.
Yeah.
So you get to bring that external perspective, but also being a consultant, I get much closer to the client than I could as an agency.
Yeah.
And there's a great deal of value in that I kind of wish we'd had as an agency, really.
How does that manifest itself, getting closer?
So it's enabled me to really understand what the blockers are for clients in getting a lot of their marketing over the line. There's an awful lot that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis that as an agency you can't see and you can't understand. And also, I think there's a very big impact of culture and internal, I don't know whether you call it politics, it's structure and dynamics internally. And when you get up close to that, it enables you to not only better understand a client, but better see what they need.
Yeah.
And what they need challenging on and what they need supporting on. And also, I increasingly see that there's more they can do themselves and should do themselves. And so it's about upskilling them and supporting them to do that.
Yeah.
Rather than as an agency, you feel like you should be the expert all the time doing everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not always the right thing for the client. So,
No.
Yeah.
How do you think, given your new experience now, different agencies, when there's that multi-agency thing around there, the PR agency, the creative agency, the branding agency, the digital agency, how can they work better together?
I think they've got to, for me, only works if all of those collective teams can be much more client-centric.
Yeah.
I worked last year with an agency that really struggled to put the client first. They were thinking about themselves all the time.
Yeah.
And I had to do quite a bit of work with them to help them see the impact of that and how that wouldn't give them the right outcome.
Yeah.
And actually...
So they were frustrated at the client not getting back to them in time, or those kinds of day-to-day frustrations.
And they just wanted, they thought that doing a certain project in a certain way was the thing to do. But they weren't seeing that there was operational things going on that were impacting this.
Yeah.
And actually the timing wasn't quite right. And also they were trying to leapfrog marketing director to get a relationship higher up, when actually internally the client was seeing that as rude and disrespectful. Yeah. So all of those dynamics were at play. But working with multiple agencies and freelancers as I am now, as long as everybody understands what we're all trying to achieve and what their part is in it.
Yeah.
So generally, it tends to work best when everybody's doing a specialist discipline. Yeah. And they, can see how it all fits together. But I do think that clients don't put enough time into bringing those individuals together and helping them see how they all fit in and what we're trying to do. Yeah. So that's a piece of work that I do often find myself doing now, because I can see from the agency's perspective how that feels, but also from the client's perspective. And you're just trying to get the right outcome for everybody. Yeah,
no, it's really interesting. It's giving you a completely different lens to look at the at the world in.
Yeah.
So if you were back in 1999 when you were setting off at Clark, and you were looking, knowing what you know now, is there anything you'd do differently or approach that you take?
Yeah, I think I would have. I always prided myself on building relationships long term. That was always our big mantra internally. It was kind of long-term life client relationship. But I look now and I think I didn't do enough work to understand the client's challenges. So whoever I was dealing with, whoever the main contact was, what was really going on for them in that business, and what was really going on for the business. If I look back to 2008, I didn't see any of that coming.
No.
Well, I should have done.
Yeah.
Because I should have been close enough to all of those businesses to know how they were being impacted and what was going on and internally in decisions.
What makes you kind of optimistic looking to the future for us poor agency folk?
I think that there is a huge opportunity for agencies who are good at what they do. And I know that sounds obvious, but I think agencies have gone through a bit of a tumultuous time and we've all tried to do too much. And actually, the magic lies in knowing what your superpower is and sticking to it. And that's what clients want. What they're looking for actually is we're going to do some stuff ourselves, but we really need support on these things that we can't do ourselves.
Yeah.
And you've got to figure out what it is that you can deliver that only you can deliver.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what you were saying before about, not feeling good enough to take on certain challenges, I noticed a recent LinkedIn post. You were surrounded with a group of women entrepreneurs who clearly must have had your back at times during that 20-year period. How important was it to be able to share, the worries and fears with a group like that who could understand and provide wise bon mots at the right time?
Yeah, you're so right. It's essential. I'm so glad that one of the things that I always did, because I was aware from day one I was running the business on my own. And so I always had, from 2000, a non-exec or a mentor. And I, over the years, built my network. And you're right, that group of ladies that are just so powerful in their own right as business people were my rock, really, because whatever I was going through, whether it was personal, whether it was the agency, they were always there to talk it through, you know? And you kind of, and it was the same experience with the Goldman Sachs group. You suddenly realise, you feel like you're the only person. I used to look out at these amazing agencies and think, we're just little old clock in Ramsbottom doing our thing. But I look now and I think, no, we were really good agency. We were solid. We were delivering the effectiveness and winning awards, not just awards for awards' sake, but we always picked the ones that were about effectiveness. Very profitable, great culture. Hopefully everybody that worked with us would say that, because that was a big thing for me. And well respected and well liked, with clients and the industry. So I just needed, I think it's that inner voice that lots of us have, where you constantly put yourself down, question yourself. And I just needed that push. And I got that externally. That's what I looked for externally. Whereas I think the non-execs that I had maybe didn't do that. What they were doing was prodding and poking and pushing. And they were the ones kind of driving me on, really, to have the courage to keep going. But you've got to work on yourself as well, haven't you? Which it wasn't a thing then. You just got on with it. We're more aware of it now, aren't we?
You weren't allowed to kind of show
no
any weakness, were you?
No. And I think early on in my career, I'd realised that I was in a bit of a disadvantage being a woman sometimes. And so I'd learned how to put on this outer bravado. And I'm quite a placid, calm person. I don't get worked up about anything. So I think I had this aura about me that I was always in control. But underneath, I was pedaling like mad, No,
you come across as though you've got everything.
I haven't.
Just so. So finally, can you talk to us about one brand, large or small, who you think is doing it right and why?
Yeah. I have to pick a B2B one, and the one that actually I've used recently to help a client understand where their brand could get to and how it should sit in the market is Hiscox, which is an insurer. B2B, small businesses, large businesses. And I say Hiscox because they've done a wonderful job of taking the kind of essence of everything that they stand for and putting it out into the world in such a simple way that's really effective, that says to the audience, we've got your back, we understand you. But they've done it from an aesthetic point of view as well. So I a lot of my work isn't about the look of a brand, but they've got both.
Yeah.
And I just think they've done a wonderful job over many, many decades with it.
Well, I'll get off and check that out. That's a really nice recommendation, a really nice way to leave on a kind of positive note. And Rimmer, thank you so much for being our guest in PR in the Real World, and best of luck in the next few years, whatever the journey takes you.
Thanks very much, Tony.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to PR in the Real World. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a quick review. Your support really helps spread the word and reach more marketing and PR professionals just like you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from the insights we share. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more tips, strategies and real world stories from the PR frontlines.